You know his book. You've heard the quotes. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. But what if that was never the point? What if the art of war wasn't a book about war at all? What if it was a blueprint for something far more valuable and far more terrifying than military victory? A blueprint for building the most efficient system of wealth extraction the ancient world had ever seen. This is the real story they don't put on the cover. This is the financial genius of Sun Tzu, and we are still living inside his system. But to understand the money, you have to understand the man. And the man was an accountant, not a general, an accountant. Sun Tzu lived in a time they call the Warring States period, a catchy name that hides the truth. This wasn't just a time of war. It was a time of total economic collapse. 7 kingdoms locked in a fight for survival. Money was bleeding out, armies were eating harvests, states were starving themselves to death trying to win. Victory wasn't about the biggest army. Victory was about the last economy standing. And Sun Tzu saw it clearly. War is not a series of battles. War is a business, the most expensive business there is. Every soldier, every sword, every grain of rice for the march, it all comes from the treasury. And a bankrupt state is a dead state, no matter how many battles it wins. So he wrote his manual. But look closer. Look at what he's actually measuring. He writes about terrain, but he's not just talking about hills and rivers. He's doing a cost-benefit analysis. Mountain warfare is expensive. River crossings slow supply lines. Swamps breed disease, which drains the medical budget. He is calculating the logistical burn rate of every single step an army takes. He writes, "The wise general loads his wealth from the enemy." This is the core of it. This is not a noble call to arms. This is a predatory financial strategy. Your supply line should not come from your own people. It should come from the land of your enemy. You fund your conquest by looting the very territory you are invading. You turn their villages into your mobile banks. You make war pay for itself. This is the first rule of Sun Tzu's finance. Never spend your own capital. But the extraction didn't stop at the enemy's border. The real system was built back home, and almost no one talks about this part. Sun Tzu's most famous idea is know your enemy and know yourself. We hear this as a motivational quote. In reality, it is a command for total surveillance. To know yourself, you must measure everything. How much grain does a province produce? Exactly how many men of fighting age live in each village? What is the tax yield down to the last coin? Sun Tzu demanded a system of data collection so precise, so intrusive, that the ruler would have a real-time balance sheet of his entire kingdom. He wasn't building just an army. He was building a centralized corporate database 2,500 years ago. This data had one purpose: control. Control of resources, control of labor, control of money. He turned the state into a machine, and the people? They were its fuel. Farmers were fuel, soldiers were fuel, craftsmen were fuel, all carefully logged, allocated, and spent in the pursuit of more fuel. This is the second rule. What can be measured can be taxed. What can be tracked can be controlled. What happened next was a revolution, but not the kind you read about in storybooks. It was a quiet, administrative revolution that changed the face of power forever. The kingdoms that adopted Sun Tzu's principles didn't just win wars. They built empires. They won because they stopped thinking like warriors and started thinking like ruthless CEOs. The battlefield was just the final transaction. The real work was in the ledgers, the supply depots, the population registers. A Sun Tzu state could calculate the exact point where an enemy kingdom would run out of money. They would provoke a war, then simply wait. They would retreat, letting the enemy army march, burning through its wealth with every step. Then, when the enemy treasury was empty and the soldiers were hungry, they would strike. Not to kill, but to acquire. They weren't conquering land, they were acquiring productive assets. This is the dark heart of it. Sun Tzu's genius was realizing that the ultimate weapon is not a sword or a strategy. It is a system, a self-sustaining economic system designed for one thing: perpetual growth through controlled conflict. But this system had a final, chilling component, a component so effective we are surrounded by its descendants today. Sun Tzu wrote, The supreme excellence is breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. We think this means diplomacy. It doesn't. It means financial warfare. If you can cripple an enemy's economy, you don't need to fight them. Destroy their harvests, sabotage their trade routes, devalue their currency, corrupt their officials with your wealth, make their own systems work against them. Break their economy, and their army will surrender itself. This is the third and final rule. The most devastating attacks never touch a soldier. They target the bank, the market, the trust in the system itself. So, you see, we misunderstood the book. The Art of War is not a manual for warriors. It is the founding document of a financial philosophy. A philosophy where every human action is a line item, where every relationship is a transaction, where peace is just the time between profitable conflicts. Sun Tzu's true legacy is not in our military academies. It is in our boardrooms. It is in the algorithms that measure our productivity. It is in the data profiles that track our every purchase. It is in the silent, systemic wars fought not over land, but over markets, supply chains, and currencies. We no longer have kings measuring grain yields. We have platforms measuring our attention yields. We no longer have armies looting villages. We have systems extracting data. The question he leaves us with is not about how to win a war. It is far more disturbing. What happens when the entire world is run like a Sun Tzu state? And when you look at your life, your job, your debts, your value to the system, whose balance sheet are you on?